Assalamu alaikum, hi everybody. So in this video guys, I'm gonna continue my series, our series of explaining the contract in the Solidity contract. So now I'm gonna go to the Solidity documentation and I will go to Solidity by example, and in today's video we're gonna see this contract called safe remote purchase. Okay, if I click it, so you can take time, maybe you pause the video or you go to the documentation and you read this, and basically this is just a small description of the contract that we're going to explain and deploy in this video. So what it says basically in this description is that we are going to implement a purchase contract, but to do this we have a problem, which is about confirming that the buyer is already received the product or not. Okay, so that's why the concept that this contract will use is that the seller will be the deployer of the contract and he should send money to the contract, and he should send the double value of the product. If the product value is, let's see, 1 ether, then he should send 2 ethers to the contract. Okay, and then also the buyer, if he want to buy the product, he will need also to send 2 ethers. Okay, and then after the buyer will receive the product, then he will confirm that he received the product, and then after he confirmed that, he will get the contract will send him the half of the value that he sent it to the contract, which is 1 ether, and then there will stay 3 ethers in the contract, which is gonna be sent to the seller, and that's it. This is the concept how this contract is gonna actually work. So let's open it on Remix and let's try to explain a bit the code and then deploy the contract. Okay, so basically this is the contract. So I think that I don't need to explain these 2 lines, and also this one. This is the name of the contract, purchase, and then we are defining some states, which is the value, and we have the address of the seller and the address of the buyer. Okay, and they are both payable and public, so we can see them. The value also is public so that we can see it and access it, and we have this state, which is gonna be the state of the purchase. Okay, so the purchase is gonna be created in the beginning, and then it can be inactive if the purchase is stopped. Okay, then it's gonna be inactive, and it can be released or locked, and we're gonna see these states when it can be that. And we have the state that represent one of those. So the state is gonna be maybe this one or this one or this one. Okay, and then we have the modifiers, which is for the conditions, to implement a conditions before implementing a function. So we have the first modifier called condition, and it takes a condition, and it just requires the same condition, and if that was correct and succeed, then it will let the function to complete. And then we have some errors. The first one is only the buyer, and this is gonna revert and give us this message. If this, when calling this error, it's gonna give us this message that says only the buyer can call this function. We have also the same for the seller. When we want to make a function only called by the seller, we're gonna use this. And we have another error which is about invalid state. If someone called a function in a non-valid state, for example, we want that function to only be called in this state, and someone called that function in this state, then he's gonna get this error. And we have value not even, and this means that someone can get this error, maybe the seller or the buyer, when he enters a value that is not an even number, means it's an odd number. Okay, maybe he enters 3 instead of entering a 4, for example. And we have this modifier which is only the buyer. It checks that the color of the function is equal the address of the buyer. Okay, and it reverses this error only the buyer, which is gonna give us this message. And then we have the same for the seller, and then we have also for the state. Okay, it reverses it invalid state. And then we have these events. The events are basically used when we want to emit a event or a change, so that we can see that in the client side when we have a website where we want other people to see the changes that are coming from the contract. But we're not going to enter to that for now. And then we have the constructor. So it is payable, so that because this contract is gonna be deployed by the seller, that's why we are assigning the address of the deployer to this seller, which is this state. Okay, and then after sending the value, so let's say I'm the seller. Okay, so now I'm the seller. When I will deploy this, my address is gonna be this seller, and the value that I will send is gonna be divided by 2 and assigned to the value which is this one, and it's public, so we can access it and see that. And we are checking if the value, which is gonna be the value that I am sending divided by 2, is gonna be this value, and we are checking this value. If we multiply this value by 2, is it gonna actually equal this value that I send? So this is the way that they are using in this contract to check if the value or the amount that the seller put to the contract or sent to the contract is an even number. And if it wasn't correct, okay, if this condition happen, means the value is different, okay, 2 values are different, then it's gonna revert and it will not be deployed, and it's gonna give this message value not even, which is this one declared here, the error, this one, and it's gonna give this message to us, and we will test that so we can see how it will work. So let's see now, after I deploy this contract and everything was correct, so let's do that first, okay, and then complete. So let's come here, and so in order to deploy, for example, if I change to Ether, okay, and let's say I have a product that I want to sell by for example 1 Ether, okay, so or let's say I want to send with 1 Ether, then I should enter 2, okay, because because if I entered just 1, it's gonna be a problem, because it's like I want to buy the product by half, okay, because the value is gonna be just the half of what I will enter. So let's see, I put 2 and I deploy, okay, so it's gonna be deployed successfully, because 2 divided by 2 is gonna be 1, and 1 multiplied by 2 is gonna be 2, which is correct, and no problem, is gonna revert. And if I check, the value is gonna be 1 ether, which is this number, okay, 1 and these zeros, and the value in here is in way, okay. They are using this, the unit, which is the way. And also let me delete this. Let's deploy, for example, even if I put 3 ether, even that 3 is not an even number, but because this is the ether, then there's gonna be zeros, okay, so that it can be divided by 2. So if I deploy this, it's gonna be deployed correctly. And if I check the value, as you see, 1, 5 and zeros. But if I change, for example, let me delete this. If I, for example, I change to the way and I put 3, then it will not work, okay. If I check this, it will not work, because 3 divided by 2 is gonna be 1, okay, because this is the way. But if I put, for example, 4 and I deploy, it's gonna work. And if I check, the value is only gonna be 2, okay, 2 way. And that's it. So now that we see the deploy, how it works, and then we have this function. So this function can only be used by the seller, okay, so it checks the seller. And of course, if you see for the balance of the contract, you see that when we deploy, the balance that we send is stored in the contract till someone is gonna buy. So we have the abort function, which is only gonna be called by the seller if the seller wants to stop this purchase, okay. So when this function is gonna be called, we are checking first the state. So the state should be created, and that means that no one has no buyer send money to the contract to buy the product. So that's why we are checking the state to be created, okay. So we are emitting if the buyer want to stop this purchase. We are emitting this aborted event, which is this one, and we are making the state inactive, okay, and we are sending the money back to the seller, okay, so that he can get his money back. So now if I click here, the money will be sent back, and this is gonna be just 0. And also for the state is gonna change. So for now the state is 0. That's because it's in this one, okay, the state created. That's why, because this is represent 0, and this is 1, and this is 2, and this is 3. So if I click on abort, which is this one, and I should, in order to call that function, I should be the seller. If I use this address and I call it, it's gonna give an error, and that's why, because we are checking only the seller, okay, which is this modifier. It requires that the address should be equal to the seller, and if it's not, it's gonna give us this error that says only the seller can call this function. And if we check, we're gonna see this is the message, okay. So now let's go back to the address of the deployer, which is the seller, and now if I click, make sure you see that this is gonna change to 0. If I click, you see it's now 0, and the money will go back to the seller, which is gonna go back to me. And if I check now, the state is gonna be 3, because after calling this function, we are changing the state to be inactive, okay. If if I check now the state, it should be 3. And now because the state is inactive, then no one can buy. Okay, and this is actually the function that where someone can buy. Okay, it's called confirm purchase, so it can only be called if the state is created. Okay, so if I call now this function confirm purchase, if I use, let's say, this one want to buy, and he enter, for example, 4. Okay, then even when he call this function, it's not gonna work. If I click it, it's gonna give us a error, and if we check, the error is gonna be smashing. The function cannot be called at this current state. Okay, which is because of this one. So what this function actually does, so it checks first, it says external, so it can only be called from the external, means from someone, not from the other functions. And then it checks the state, is it still created, and then it checks the condition that the value that the buyer enter is equal to the value multiplied by 2, because he need to enter the value the value the double of the value. Okay, and then we are putting this payable, so that's why this function color, the button color is red. That's because it is payable, means it receives money. And then we are emitting this event, which is purchase confirmed, which is this event here, declared here. And then we are putting the buyer to the address of the caller of this function, and we are changing the state to be locked. So the state is gonna be locked when someone send money to buy that product. Okay, so it's like this contract is used to buy only one product. Okay, means one product to only one, or let's see, to do only one purchase. Okay, because one purchase can be for many products, so this contract is only for one purchase. So what we're gonna do now, we're gonna delete this, and I'm gonna change again to this one, and I will deploy it again. Okay, and then I will open it. So I will now change to this address. So now this is the buyer. Okay, and then I will try to send some money, but I will not enter 4, I will enter just 3. Okay, so if I enter 3, then 3 is not gonna work, because 3 because we need to enter 4. Okay, exactly the double of the value. The value is now 2, we need to enter 2 times 2. Okay, so if I enter just 3, I click here, I will get this error from, which is gonna be from let's see it, which is gonna be from this condition. Okay, so we have condition. If we go to the top, so we have this modifier condition. It takes that condition, which is this one. The message value is should be equal to, if it should be equal to the value multiplied by 2. And if we go back to see that, it requires this. Okay, that's why we're getting that error. Okay, so if I enter now 4, and if I click confirm purchase, it should work now. Okay, so now it works, and you see now the balance in the contract is 8. okay. And then so now the buyer is send money to the contract buy, but he didn't confirm that he received the product yet, okay. So in order to do that, he should call this function confirm received, okay. And this function can only be called by the buyer, okay. So this is the modifier. Let's go back to see it again. So this modifier checks if the message, if the color of this function is not equal to the buyer, then it will revert this error. Only the buyer which is gonna give this message, okay. So if I try to use another address, for example this address, because this is the address of the buyer. If I use this address and I try to confirm receive, it's gonna give this error that says only the buyer can call this function. But if I switch to the address of the real buyer, and if the buyer actually receives the product, then he will confirm that, and you see it's now working correctly. And as you see, the money now is just 6 way, okay, and the 2 ways is sent back to the buyer, okay. And this 6 now should be sent back to the seller, okay. And it's gonna be sent, I think, by calling the function, exactly this function, refund seller. And this function can only be called by the seller, and it can only be called if the state is released, and the state can only be released if the buyer actually confirm that he received the product. So when the buyer confirms that he received the product, we are emitting that the item is received, means the product is received, and then we are changing the state to be released, and then we are sending the value back to the, means the half of the amount that he sent, we are sending it back to him, means to the buyer. And so now the seller can get the money, means the 3 times the value, because the value is 2, okay. So now he's gonna get all this, which is value by 3, and it can only be called by the seller. If I try to call it, for example, if I try to call it, it's gonna give me this error. That's because it says only the seller can call this function. So that's why I need to switch to the seller. And also if I check how much the seller has, if you see, this is the amount that the seller has now, okay. You see we have 5.4, and if I click now this refund, you see now the balance in the contract is 0, and if I check now, you see the amount has changed, okay. It's now 7.5. And yeah, basically this is the contract. It's really a simple contract, very simple and easy to understand. And yeah, thank you for watching, and see you in next video.